Why is it that some people are still here, past 60, past 70, past 80, when many of their peers have already gone home? Why has God kept certain men and women breathing, waking up each morning, watching the years roll forward while the world around them changes, ages, and shifts? Why has God kept you or the elders you love alive beyond the age, when many believe their purpose has already been spent? There is a question that echoes quietly in the halls of many hearts. Lord, why am I still here? Some ask it with gratitude, some with confusion, and others with a silent ache, wondering if the latter years of life still carry meaning, assignment, or divine intention. Culture often whispers that the elderly are past their usefulness, but heaven does not speak that language. God does not measure purpose by youthfulness, nor relevance by physical strength. The breath in your lungs is the evidence that heaven has not closed the chapter of your calling. But beneath that surface level question lies something deeper, a spiritual mystery, a divine logic, a biblical pattern. God never keeps someone on this earth just because. There is always intention behind his preservation. There is always purpose behind his timing. And there is always a reason, often hidden, to why a person's life is extended when others are not. You may think your best days are behind you. You may feel forgotten, overlooked, or slowed by the weight of years. But what if God has kept the elderly alive? Because the greatest assignment of their journey is not behind them, but ahead. What if the later years carry a mantle earlier years were not mature enough to carry? What if heaven has kept you because someone's deliverance, someone's breakthrough, someone's salvation is tied to the wisdom, endurance, and spiritual authority you gained across decades? There is a shocking truth buried in Scripture about why God preserves certain lives far past 60. And today we are going to uncover it. Before we uncover the mystery, let us acknowledge something quietly powerful. Longevity in Scripture is never random. Whenever God extended a person's years, it was prophetic, it was strategic, it was woven into a larger plan that stretched beyond their individual life. Noah lived long because the world needed a preacher of righteousness in a generation drowning in wickedness. Moses lived long because the nation needed a steady hand and a seasoned spirit to guide them out of bondage. Anna the prophetess lived long because she had one assignment: to witness the Messiah. And her old age became the very stage heaven used to fulfill that purpose. In every era, God preserved elders because their presence carried weight in the spiritual realm. Heaven knows the value of years lived, battles fought, prayers prayed, tears shed, testimonies gathered, and wisdom earned. Wisdom that cannot be downloaded, accelerated, or cheaply gained. When God keeps someone beyond 60, it is because their life has evolved from merely being a story to becoming a vessel, a witness, a spiritual archive. But here is the part many overlook. The later years are often the years when God softens the heart to understand things the younger version of you would have resisted. These years become fertile soil for deeper revelation, gentler obedience, and a greater listening posture. God keeps the elderly because he has shaped them into instruments that can carry truths, warnings, blessings, and impartations that the younger generations desperately need. And yet, this is where the mystery intensifies. Many people reach 60 or 70 and feel spiritually disconnected. They say, I used to hear God more clearly, or I don't feel his nearness like I once did, or my purpose feels finished. If you or someone you love has ever felt that way, understand this. Silence does not mean abandonment. Stillness is not rejection. When God appears quiet in one season of your later years, it is often because he is preparing you to release something in the next. A preserved life is often a life being positioned. In fact, if you've ever wrestled with God's silence at 60, at 70, or even earlier, you need to dive deeper into the devotional, When God is Silent, which I've placed in the pinned comment for you. It is for those who feel God's quiet seasons most intensely, especially in these transitional years when identity, purpose, and legacy collide. That devotional will open your understanding to why God sometimes pulls back his voice before revealing a mandate. But right now, in this moment, God is pulling back the curtain. You are about to see why heaven keeps certain lives on earth far longer than expected. There is a revelation coming that may shift the way you see aging, purpose, calling, and even the elderly around you. Before we go deeper, pause and take a moment to engage spiritually. If you feel the weight of what is being revealed, declare it by liking this message and comment the phrase, "God still has a purpose for me." Share this teaching with someone who needs hope in their later years, and let this act be a seed of faith. Let me take you into a story, a parable of sorts about a man named Elias. He was 74 years old, a quiet man living in a forgotten village, tucked away between hills and forests. The world had changed around him. Friends had passed on, family had scattered, and the rhythms that once fueled his days had slowed. Elias would sometimes sit outside his small wooden home, watching the sun fall behind the mountains, wondering why God had kept him alive this long. In his younger years, Elias had been a blacksmith, strong-armed and sharp-minded. He had forged tools for farmers, crafted hinges for homes, repaired wagons, and shaped iron with fire and resolve. But now his hands trembled, his back curved, and his strength had faded into a mere shadow of memory. Often he'd whisper to God, "Why am I still here? What purpose is left for an old man like me?" Every evening he waited for an answer, but the heavens seemed silent. One morning, Elias woke with a burden on his heart, a gentle nudge, soft yet persistent. It felt like a wordless invitation, a quiet instruction pulling him toward the forest trail behind his home. He had walked that trail many times before, but this time the stirring within him felt different. He sensed something sacred was waiting, though he couldn't explain it. He leaned on his wooden staff, stepped onto the path, and began his slow journey down the winding trail. The forest was alive with the sound of birds, the whispering of leaves, and the crunch of earth beneath his feet. It felt as though creation itself was quietly watching him, waiting for something to unfold. About an hour into his walk, Elias heard a faint sound, a soft cry, almost like a small animal in distress. He followed the noise until he reached a clearing where a young boy no more than 12 sat on the ground with his face buried in his arms. The boy was trembling, trying to muffle his sobs. Elias approached slowly. "Son," he said in a gentle voice, "are you hurt?" The boy lifted his face, eyes red and swollen. "No, not hurt," he said, "just lost." Elias helped him sit up. "What's your name?" "Micah," the boy whispered. Elias noticed the child's backpack lying nearby. The boy explained that he had traveled into the forest to escape the shouting at home. His parents had been fighting for weeks, and he felt invisible, unheard, unwanted, and overwhelmed. He wandered too far, and now he couldn't find his way back. Elias listened quietly. He didn't rush to speak. His years taught him that deep pains require space to breathe before they can heal. When the boy finished, Elias took a deep breath and said, "Micah, when I was your age, I felt the same way. My home was loud with anger too, and I often ran away to quiet places thinking no one cared." He leaned closer. "But you are not alone, and you are not forgotten." His voice carried a weight the boy didn't expect, a gravity born from decades of surviving storms, losses, and loneliness. Elias took Micah's hand and said, "Come, I will walk with you." Together, they slowly retraced the path through the forest. The boy stayed close to him, occasionally leaning on Elias's arm for reassurance. As they walked, Elias shared pieces of his past, the hardships he endured, the mistakes he made, the forgiveness he found, and the God who carried him through it all. Micah listened with wide eyes. He had never heard anyone speak of God with such tenderness and conviction. The old man's quiet faith felt different from the sermons he had heard at home. Elias's voice didn't sound like a pastor preaching from a distance. It sounded like a living testimony wrapped in warmth and humility. When they finally reached the outskirts of the village, The boy's parents were already searching frantically. The moment they saw him, they ran to him in tears. They embraced him, apologizing for the tension he had been forced to carry alone. In the midst of the emotional reunion, the father turned to Elias. With tears in his eyes, he said, "Thank you, sir. Thank you for saving my son." Elias shook his head. "No," he said softly, "I just walked where God led me." But that day marked more than a reunion. It became the beginning of healing in that family. The father sought help for his anger. The mother rediscovered her strength, and the household slowly transformed into a place of peace. And it all began with the simple obedience of an elderly man who thought his life no longer had meaning. The story does not end there. A few weeks later, Micah visited Elias again. This time he came with a notebook. "I want to write down everything you told me," he said shily. "I want to remember it." Elias smiled. "Why?" Because the boy said, "You speak like someone who knows things I need to learn, and I want to learn." Elias was stunned. For years, he felt